Okay, Shalom, how's everyone doing? Okay, today's day 2 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. First off, I want to say that today's shir is generously sponsored by Tzvi Shaiwitz as Chutz for Zalman Tzvi ben Rav Chaim Avram. Okay, and we'll be learning today Siman Aleph Seif Beis. Okay, let's get right into it. V'gam b'shachvo al mishkavo yida lefnei mi shehu shochiv. Right, when a person's lying in bed, when he's about to go to sleep, he should realize who he's lying in front of. Umiyad kisheyo mishnaso, and immediately when he wakes up, yizkar chazdei Hashem yisparach shemo asher asayimo. He should remember the kindness that Hashem has done with him. Shehechazir lo es nishmaso, that he returned his neshama to him. Asher hifkida etzlo ayefa, which he Hashem kept his neshama with him while the person was tired. V'hechazira lo chadash regua, and he returned it refreshed and very peaceful. Kedei lavod avodaso yisbarach shema, right? He returned his neshama in order to serve Hashem. V'chal yachalta, with all he's able to. U'lasharso kol hayom, and to serve him the entire day. Ki zeh kol adam, because this is what man's all about, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kamosha amar HaKasav, like the pasuk says, chadashim la bikarim rabbe munasecha. Right? We're new every morning. Great is your trust. Perish. That means b'chol boker naseh hadam priya chadasha. Right? Every morning a person is created anew. He's a new person. V'yoda b'chol levavo la Hashem yisbarach shemo al zos. Therefore, one should thank Hashem for this. Uva'odo al mishkavo, and while he's still lying in his bed, Yomar should say moda'ani lefanecha. Right? We should thank you, Melech HaVekayim, the King, shehechazarta bi nishmasi b'chamla, that you return my neshama with compassion. Rabba amunasecha, great is your trust. And Kitzur adds, Afa pisha adayin ein yadav nikios yachol omar zos kivan shei b'oshem. Right? Even though we say when you go to sleep at night, we have an assumption that your hands touch the covered part of your body, which make your hands not clean, so you're not able to say Shem Hashem. But you're able to say Moda'ani, doesn't have Shem Hashem in it. But then he says another important halacha, v'yafsik ma'at bein tevas bechemla l'tevas rabba. He said you should pause in between the words bechemla and rabba munasecha, because rabba munasecha is his own phrase, as we see from the pasuk that he just quoted, rabba munasecha. So Moda'ani is based off that. So therefore, you should pause before the words rabba munasecha. Okay, fine. Let's go back. So it's interesting. The first thing the Kitzur says is when you're lying in your bed, you should remember who you're lying in front of. So this is a continuation of the quote we had of the Ramah yesterday. This is still based off the quote of the Ramah of Shvisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit anyway, that we said yesterday. And a lot of people ask, if you look at the Siman, the title of the whole Siman that we're talking about, we're dealing with halachos of getting up in the morning, right? That's the halachos we're dealing with. So it's a little interesting, he adds here, okay, when you're lying in your bed, you should know who you're lying in front of. Why does he mention that in the Siman that he's talking about waking up in the morning? So that's a good question. But the answer could be very simple. Basically, there's a Gemara in Brachos, Tezayin and Beis. It gives a list of different tefillos that the various Amoraim would say after davening. And one of the Amoraim said the following tefillah. He said a whole long tefillah, but he said, "V'nashkim, we should wake up. V'nimsa yachol avinu liras shmecha." Right? We should wake up every morning, and we should have the ability to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you look in Rashi there, Rashi in Brachos over there says on the words that we should wake up and we should be able to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, "Shelo yiskaber aleinu yitzar hara," that the yitzar hara shouldn't overtake us. Bihir har halayla. Right, with various bad thoughts at night, lasor me'acharecha bayom. And because of the bad thoughts at night, we're not going to be able to fear Hashem in the morning. So if you look in Rashi, the way Rashi explains it, he says that the way we act in the morning is really based off, how we go to sleep at night. Right, that the day is really just a hemshech of how we go to sleep at night. So if we go to sleep at night with this idea of yiras Hashem, to know that we're in front of Hashem, it's going to help out our entire day. It's going to help out the entire morning. So that's a nice pshat. And then he says the next halacha that the Kitzur is really dealing with. He's dealing with the halacha of saying Moda'ani every morning. So we really have to ask ourselves, where does this come from? So if you look at the Gemara, no mention of Moda'ani. look in the Rishonim, there's really no mention, right? Rambam, refresh, no mention. Look in Shulchan Aruch even, no mention. Where does it come down? Magen Avram. The Magen Avram, in the end of Siman Daled, he quotes a Seif Seder Olam, who says that, no, when you wake up in the morning, you should say, Moda'ani. So the question really is, what's the reason of this din? Where's he really coming from? So there's a nice piece in the Rivus Ephraim. This is in Chelek Hey, Siman Beis, where he's talking a little about it. Here, he's talking a little about Moda'ani over here. And he wants to know, where does this come from? Where does this whole idea of saying Moda'ani when we wake up, where does it come from? What's the reason for the din? So he says, there's another bracha we say in the morning. Right? He says there's a bracha called Elokai Neshama. And Elokai Neshama, it's an interesting bracha, because usually when we have a bracha, it has to start with the word Baruch. Right? All our brachas start with the word Baruch. Right? Baruch. It always starts with the word Baruch. So the question is, why doesn't Elokai Neshama start with the word Baruch? So that's a major question. So he quotes a lot of different Rishonim who give different answers. Right? So first he quotes the Shita of Tosfos, who says, no, usually bracha start with the word Baruch, but Elokai Neshama is a different bracha, because Elokai Neshama is it's a birchas hodah, right? Maybe a birchas hodah doesn't have to start with the word Baruch. Okay, that's what he says. Then he gives another answer, that the Rosh says. The Rosh gives an answer that, no, it doesn't start with the word Baruch, because there's a halacha called a bracha smucha lechaverta. Bracha smucha lechaverta is, if one bracha is connected to another bracha, the first bracha you start with the baruch, therefore the bracha after is kind of dragged after that, so it wouldn't start with the baruch. For example, take Shemona Esrei, the first bracha of Shemona Esrei starts with the baruch. The second bracha doesn't, because the second bracha is samuch l'chaverta. The second bracha, is dragged after the first one, therefore there's no need to start with the baruch. Okay, so what's Elokai Neshama dragged after? So the Rosh says you should actually say it after Asher Yatzar. Right? The Rosh says that we want Elokai Neshama to become right after another bracha. So it doesn't have to start with a baruch. Therefore, it should actually be said right after Asher Yatzar. Okay, fine. That's another pshat. And then he quotes the Meiri, who says he agrees with this idea that no, Elokai Neshama is samuch l'chaverta. It is, but not to Asher Yatzar. He says, you know what it's samuch to? It's samuch to birchas hamapil. Whoa, hamapil. The Meiri says, it's samuch to hamapil, right? Because hamapil is, right before you go to sleep, you say hamapil. You go to sleep, right? And that's all part of the bracha, right? Hamapil is going to sleep, then you go to sleep. And then you wake up and you haven't really, there's really been no interruption, right? Sleep is part of the bracha. There's really no interruption. Therefore, actually, it's very possible that Elokai Neshama is actually samuch to the bracha of hamapil. Right? If you look in the Rambam, when he talks about Birchas HaShachar, he says, the first Birchas HaShachar we say every day. Hamapil. That's what he says. Hamapil. So, that's a possibility. Okay, fine. And just to end off, the Rivus Ephraim says, he says, if you look in the Ri Ben Yakar, he says, true, that really you should say Elokai Neshama right in the morning to make sure it's samuch to hamapil. Right? If you want Elokai Neshama to be samuch to hamapil, right, you have to really you can't really make any other interruptions between hamapil and Elokai Neshama. And he says, actually that's a very hard thing to do. Right? He says, Anu medabrim kama pamim time. A lot of times it's just not so possible, right? You're gonna say other things before you say Elokai Neshama. You are gonna make an interruption. Therefore, he says we say it after Asher Yatzar. That's the Ri Ben Yakar says. Okay, why are we quoting all this? So the Rivus Ephraim concludes, and he says, now I understand why we say Moda'ani right when we wake up. So why do we say Moda'ani? Because really we should be saying Elokai Neshama, because there's this big idea that Elokai Neshama should be the first thing we say when we wake up. So it's close to the bracha of hamapil. Right, we say hamapil right when we go to sleep, Elokai Neshama right when we wake up. But we don't do that for various reasons. Right, first, he quoted the Ri Ben Yakar. He says we don't do it because we probably will make an interruption. But we at least say something similar. He says, the Rivus Ephraim says we at least want to say something similar to Elokai Neshama. And what's that? Modani, right? It's a thing Hashem for our neshama. That's what we do in Elokai Neshama. So therefore, that's a great mikor for this halacha of saying Modani right when we wake up in the morning. I just want to end with one more thing, is that if you look in the Yerushalmi, and actually the Bir Halacha in Siman Aleph quotes this Yerushalmi, and he actually says about this Yerushalmi, he says, Nachon Mod Lizar, he says a person should be careful, Lomar, he should be careful to say, Kodem Gimel Tfilos, before Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv, right? He starts with before Shachris. You say a certain thing before Shachris. You're supposed to say, Moda Ani Lefanecha, Hashem Elokai V'Elokei Avosai, Shotzesani Me'afelu La'ora. Right? Bir Halacha quotes the Yerushalmi, that the Yerushalmi says that, yeah, there is a Moda Ani, we say. There's a Moda Ani that he took us out from darkness to light. And the Bir Halacha actually says to say that. And he says that you say something else before Mincha. He says that before Mincha you say, Kishem Shazikisani Liros Kishachama B'Mizrach, just like I was able to see the sunrise, Kach Zachiz Liros B'Ma'ariv, I should be able to see the sunset. Okay, and then you say something else by Ma'ariv. But that's what the Bir Halacha brings down B'Shem the Yerushalmi. If you look at Aruch HaShulchan points out, he's like, none of the Rishonim really bring down this halacha. So he wonders why. Like, why don't they? So the Aruch HaShulchan says you have to take a look at that Gemara. You have to take a look at that Yerushalmi. That Yerushalmi is discussing why we daven 3 times a day. Right? So the Yerushalmi gives an option. Oh, do you know why we daven 3 times a day? Because there's these 3 like nature changes 3 times. We have the sunrise, that's where the sun is in one direction. The middle of the day it's in one direction, at night it's in another. And it says on that, on that you should also thank Hashem for these things, right? Right. You should also thank Hashem, and that's basically what these tefillos are going based off. They're going based off the change in the day, and the Yerushalmi says davening is also based off that. But Aruch HaShulchan says if you look in the Bavli, and we always pass on the Bavli over the Yerushalmi, it gives 2 other reasons, right? It doesn't bring down this 3rd reason, right? The 2 reasons it gives is either it's based off the avos, right? There are 3 avos, or it's based off the carbon tamid, right? The carbon tamid was brought 2 times a day, and then the leftover karbanos were burnt at the end of the day. So therefore, the Aruch HaShulchan says that's probably why the other poskim don't bring it down. But the Bir Halacha does say, Nachon Ma'od Lizar. Okay. Shkoyach.